Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Carver Conservation Commission meeting of Wednesday, April 20th, 2022. We'll get right into our agenda. First up is an enforcement order on Tremont Street, Slocum Gibbs, DEPSC 126-366.
Good evening.
Hi, how are you?
We're doing well. For the record, Sarah Stearns with Beals and Thomas, and with me is Gary Garrett.
Gary Garrettson, Slocum Gibbs, Cranberry
Cup. We also have my colleague, also a wetland scientist with Beals and Thomas, Andrew Gorman, is here with us as well.
A little more in the mic.
Okay.
All right, maybe you can turn up the mic a little bit.
Is that better?
You're going to turn
close.
it up a little bit. Thank you.
Okay. So thank you for your time tonight. We just wanted to bring this to the Commission's attention. This is Mr. Garrettson's property on off of Tremont Street, and I actually have some exhibits to hand out just so you can follow along.
I'm giving him a copy of the letter too. Okay. I forgot to do that. Yeah.
Thank you.
Do you have enough letters?
Do you have enough? Did Dan get one of those letters?
Did you get the letter, Dan?
Yeah, send that
I did.
down. We need one more.
Oh, that one, no.
Letter.
Oh, no, we have one. Send the crinkled one back.
No.
Okay.
So
Good.
if you recall a few weeks back, there was a request for a certificate of compliance on this order of condition on the Commission's agenda temporarily. And as part of that request, Mr. Garrettson had asked us to go out and look at this area that the order had covered. We noted some inconsistencies with what was approved, and just, we brought it to his attention, brought it to Brooke's attention. Mr. Delaney, Mr. Garrettson's counsel, sent a letter to Brooke, and we copied DEP on it as well, just noting that instead of requesting to close out the order, we were going to propose a restoration in the area where we're noting the change. And I can just run through these exhibits with you just so everyone knows the property that we're talking about. And we've got a couple of locus maps on top that show just where the area is in relation to Tremont Street, which is the main road that we would go in off of. This was a permitted project. It was an earth removal project in 2005, and work had commenced over time. This was an order of conditions that was issued in 2005 and extended in 2008, and then extended again through the Permanent Extension Act, but ultimately has lapsed. So the work that is within jurisdictional buffer zone to the BBW to the south of this site was permitted, but the reservoir that was proposed in this area is actually a little bit different from what the original order had approved. And if you look at this third page in your packet, it shows the site with a yellow circle, just kind of focusing on the area that we'd like to address. And then there's an exhibit in your packet that shows a plan overlaid. It's the second to last page. That helps to just see what was originally approved for this area. Does this page help you? So instead of a very large reservoir with a bog road between the existing wetland and the reservoir, it is a smaller reservoir with a small channel between the BBW and the pond and the agricultural pond. So we walked the site last week with Brooke and talked about some ideas to restore this area where it's been channelized. We think that we can come up with a good plan. Mr. Garrettson is very supportive of whatever the commission and we come up with for a restoration plan in this area, and willing to have us work on a design collaboratively and make sure everybody's happy with it. And really just address this one spot so that it can be, the order can eventually be closed out. That's really the goal here, to really just make sure that everything works with the original approval and the commission feels comfortable closing out that order and that everyone feels comfortable moving forward. And again, the sheet that's labeled Figure 3 that has the original approved plan overlaid on today's aerial photo kind of paints the best picture. And, I think, Gary can talk about the background of why decisions were made that they pivoted from what was approved in the larger channel, the larger reservoir, to what was built out there today.
The project was approved in 2005, and it was approved to do the work over in there. We started to do the work and immediately found that the material was less than desirable. The idea was to take an upland area and be able to construct a 6-acre bog with a reservoir at the bottom end that would be self-sufficient. In other words, it wasn't logged onto a stream or anything else. So the idea was to be doing that. As soon as we started to move material out of there, we found car-sized boulders and everything else in the hill. So, so much for foresight. So that's why the project was closed out with the earth removal was finished in 2018. And as we wound up going that long into it, 2005 to 2018 is a long time, and we wound up having boulders that needed to be carted away. I built seawalls with the stone that was there and everything else. It was not an easy process to get this done. But as time goes on, we had the need to be able to have to build more cranberry bog. So I built 27 acres and renovated bog in the Wareham end of my property, and we did all of that. At a cost of about $2.1 million, we did the renovations that were down there. By the time we came back up to the 6-acre piece, it was going to be the watershed of the first of my operations in an upland area that we would do. This was then put to the side and shelved. In the process of doing the excavation, the material was in such poor quality that my contractor needed to wash some of the sand, and that's how this waterhole area came about. So he was cleaning it to be able to market it and get a level spot going across in this area that's down there. It's all prepped. It's ready to complete the project. I'd still like to put it on hold and close out the order of conditions at the end once we fix this, and then be able to decide what's going to be going on. There's been change of owners next door to us. There's been two other changes in the property that's been down there since Clark Griffith had it and I started the project. So as it entered in, I'm embarrassed by the, in 103 years, we haven't been had a wetlands violation in our property. Whatever I can do and whatever you feel is necessary to do this, to remedy the issue that's there, we're more than happy to come up with a plan that you feel. And that's why I immediately hired Sarah to be giving us the guidance about what would be necessary. We prefer to husband and bring along the wetland areas that we value so much. So I come from a background of my grandfather not filling in the wetlands when Campanelli was building the houses on Charlotte Furnace Road and selling them for $16,000 in the 1960s. So my grandfather was stubborn enough to still want to keep the wetland areas there. He was the snapping turtle of the wetland crowd. So there's 900 acres of property that we have through there that we've been able to bring along, and it's still undeveloped, and we'll see how what the future is, but we need to be doing bog renovation. The bogs that I did in Wareham came out fabulously well. We need to have more bogs renovated, and we appreciate the Conservation Commission's efforts to understand this and work with growers as they do bog renovations on their property, if we don't, we're gonna lose the industry in the area here. We've become much better at understanding how to do bogs in an upland area, which this was going to be the first test case. And because of the quality of the material, we put it to one side and moved along and needed to go spend the money in another location. And that's it. But I appreciate, I throw myself on what your decisions are going to be able to help us remedy the situation. And that's what we'd like to do. And then be able to close out the order on that area there. And at some point in the future, perhaps continue the bog operation, building the cranberry bog there. Thanks.
Okay. Any questions, anyone? I just have a couple of things that I for my own edification. The channel, what was that originally dug for? I know that.
To get water that would be able to come in. The water filled up too high in the area that was there. So the water is heading towards the wetland area in there. And as the water generation that was there was going towards the wetland area right now. And it was used to facilitate water that was coming in and out of the area that was next door.
All right, on figure 2, which is the close-up from Google, just north of your reservoir, there is another body of water that's a
Yep.
lighter blue. Is that just water that filled in from earth removal, or?
No, that was going to be the start of the reservoir at
Okay.
the upper end. It was going to be, both were going to be watered, the
Okay.
reservoir.
Okay. How big is that, do you know, offhand, or roughly?
No.
Okay, square feet I'm looking for. Okay.
Looks like about 200 by 150.
Yeah, that's about, yeah, the scale. Okay.
Go by the scale.
Yeah, okay. All right, I ask because I have a feeling we'll be asked. Do you have ideas for what you want to do?
We have been noodling a few different ideas in this area since we walked out there. Andrew today actually was in the BVW delineating it so that we know exactly where the limit of the existing wetland is, so that we can do our best to tie into that and match that elevation, and just have an idea of where the existing is to complete our plan. Within the next couple of weeks, we're having our survey crew go out to this area, locate the wetland line, the channel, and some topography in this area so that we can play around with some proposed grading so that we can create essentially a small BVW in this area where the channel has been dug, and really just kind of soften the grade so it's not just a channel, it's more of a vegetated wetland in this area. So, I think we can make something nice out here. We're going to end up increasing the jurisdictional resource area on the site. We'll do,
Okay.
We'll propose some native hydrophytic plants that already has, cattails coming up in the channel, and a number of sedges and rushes that have filled in. So I think it's already got a nice start. But I think if we just work to soften those grades a little bit and encourage some diversity of species, we can really just kind of have a lobe of a BVW that will, kind of tailor off of what's existing out, a mature BVW that's out there right now.
Okay.
We're happy to submit a draft if the commission would like to take a look at it. Once we think we have a good plan in place, we can go through Brooke. However, the commission feels that, the best plan.
I think the more transparency, the better, just because of where we're at with this thing. I have a question, if I may.
Go right ahead.
Thank you very much for coming tonight, Karen. I think that there are very few people in this town who would disagree with the integrity of this gentleman who's sitting at the table here. you said initially that you were going to expand that reservoir that Savory, that little pool that Savory asked what it was. Are you going to have enough water on this site in general to harvest, to take care of
The
your...
original drawings were adequate for the water supply in the 6 acres of bog that was going to go up above it. So the idea would be is to build it as a one shop. When we figured the depth and the width and the length, that it would contain enough water. My friend Ben Gilmore had done the engineering for me back in the day in 2004 and 5. And we've figured stuff in the past, and he's been accurate.
And you think it's still adequate?
Yes, it's not finished yet, so this is only rough. It would need to be enlarged, but the idea is that we didn't want to leave a big open hole there. That
Right.
This is something that would be, similarly to the bogs haven't been excavated or anything as yet either. I'd rather leave a flat surface and then have it be ready to go. The idea would be is to then keep that material on site to be able to use for the bog,
Right.
the additional bog work. So when we reached what we felt was the limit of the material that we wanted to take off site, I wasn't going to continue to dig and get material off of there. This is a bog operation that was going to be, and would need a pile of material that would be able to bring itself together.
The reason I ask is because we've had a couple of cranberry bog owners that are talking about some of the places that used to send water downstream to them
Yeah.
are now not sending it, so now they're trying to enlarge their resource area so they'll have enough water to do their own harvest. And a few years back during the drought, when everybody was borrowing and trying to get water just to do the harvest, so that's why I asked the question.
Historically, Alan, we would use the rivers and streams and ponds as the resource areas for cranberry operations. Now, with all of the inherent issues with people losing beachfront or whatever, and then cutting down on stream flows at different times of the year, the water is never there when you need it.
Right.
Well, cranberries need to be more of a production operation than kind of gathering fruit in the wild, in the woods, as we used to do. And I grew up in the 50s when you had these patchy bogs that were kind of terrible, and you'd get water wherever to be able to do that. And now we need a production facility.
Right.
The areas that were renovated have quadrupled the amount of output with less water use, with better control of all of the resources that are there. So we wind up doing it. We've mastered a lot of the ability and taken out some of the issues that were there with hardworking people gathering fruit in the woods to now having a production facility that we can market to the world, and having bogs that will have enough production so that we can pay our workers enough money so that we can wind up doing the contributions to the community that we need to do. So.
Thank you.
Okay. Anyone else? No?
I'd like to just see a drawing, and they can, we should keep this as transparent as possible, just
Right.
simply because of where we're at with it.
I think
And-
that's the best thing to do with it, because when we were out there, because then now they're gonna have more BVW, which is really
Yeah.
the more valuable of the resource areas, instead of having to come out. I mean, honestly, I have to say, I didn't find it to be a big deal, but anyway.
I'm sure it wasn't a
Yeah,
big
but the
deal.
restoration, I think that's the best,
All right,
way
on our
to
agenda,
restore
it does say enforcement order.
yes, I have it.
That's what we're going to do, that's our recommendation to do,
Yep.
your recommendation that we do an enforcement
Yeah,
order.
and then, and this
Okay.
basically just says, that we're requiring restoration of unauthorized construction of a drainage swale, and then the restoration plan will be filed.
All right, do we have a date?
I have May
And-
31st,
But
and I
May 30.
talked to Sarah about that, so that seems to be a reasonable, or at least
Okay.
at least if we get a draft by then, that would be,
Yeah, I think we
Good.
should, the only delay that I was concerned about is just getting the survey crew out there and collecting all that existing data so that we could use that to do the design from. But it sounds like we'll have no trouble doing that, and we can certainly, once we have a draft pulled together, send it a PDF to Brooke and she can certainly share it with you, and, or we can come back in and discuss,
Yeah.
you know, really whatever makes the most sense.
Okay.
We can certainly meet that date.
Okay, well, I wasn't able to make the site visit. I would like to see it at some point,
I have a question.
so,
If
yes.
anyone would like to go
Yeah.
out, we can certainly
Yeah, okay.
arrange that.
If they do them on a Saturday, I could probably do it.
Yeah,
You know,
I
these
think-
guys are
We work
retired.
You need-
7 days a week, so that's fine.
Some of
think
us
you
work
need-
all the time.
I think you do need to see it because, you know,
It is worth seeing, you know,
Alright.
it's small, but,
Yeah.
you
Okay.
know,
it's
trying to close out an open order of conditions when it's not,
Yep.
doesn't quite meet, we just thought it made the most sense to do our best to, you know.
We
really
appreciate
make
the
it-
commission's understanding, but we also want to make sure that that everything is more than satisfactory. There has been some disturbance,
Okay.
and I want to take care of it.
That's fine, and we appreciate that. You had a question?
And correct me because I may be wrong, this is new ground for me. Mr. Garrettson made a very important statement when he said, in I think 110 years, they've never had a violation. I'm not in favor of having to do an enforcement order if we have an agreement that, and we know him to be a man of his word, that if he says he'll do something, and Sarah says she'll do something, this board has enough experience to know that you can take it to the bank. We can always do an enforcement order after the fact. I question the need for a written enforcement order. If they're willing to do this kind of work, at least let them have a chance to come back with what they want to draw and what they want to do.
Brooke,
So correct me if I'm wrong, do we have to do an enforcement order?
what is the benefit of having an enforcement order? Does it kind of tie it up in a, you know, does it make it more official? Does it help to defray anybody from coming in and making comments
yeah,
about
it
this?
probably does. And then because he wants to get the certificate of compliance, that we, something that would sort of, you could follow up and say, okay, now he's complied with the enforcement order, so now we can issue the COC because it's all been restored.
Yeah, but see,
As
I see it going the other way. I see it being one of these, oh, see, he didn't do his thing, we had to give him an enforcement order, and they used that against him. Bottom line, they're gonna use, the sun didn't shine today, they're gonna use that against them too, but, you know, we try to find something a little bit more down to earth.
Well-
I'm just not in favor of the enforcement order, and I will vote no.
And that's fine, you're entitled to your vote. I think that the enforcement order shows an immediate action in good faith by Mr. Garrettson.
I'm old school, I used to borrow money in a handshake.
Okay.
I think
But-
Gary is too.
But
So,
I don't think anybody sitting at this table disagrees with you, but there are other people who don't sit at this
Don't
table.
care?
Well, okay.
Yeah,
That doesn't
Is that
surprise
honest
me
enough?
either. I think that as long as there's no damage, it's not, I don't think, is this a reputational damage to have one?
I believe it is.
What is your opinion?
I've taken shots in the chin before. This is
Yeah,
nothing.
I don't
I
think it-
appreciate Alan talking about, but this was an oversight by me. And I hadn't been to the site and seen what it was like. I should have been maintaining. And as you wind up getting a little bit long in the tooth, as I have been, I have an appreciation. In my youth, this never would have happened, but now there is a violation. I'll take the enforcement order, and I have an appreciation for the position that the commission's in. Don't say it's because I've been around since dirt was here in Carver. It doesn't make any difference. I would rather have this go in the proper methods than not having it be looked at as a, gee, isn't that something? So-
it is a violation, so theoretically,
All right.
we can, issue an enforcement order and just,
Okay.
All right.
Can I,
Yes,
Still-
Mr. Badger.
we've issued enforcement orders for a lot less things, but.
I always like to be clear on what I'm enforcing before I sign anything that's enforcing something, and they're talking about putting together a plan.
So you're really enforcing the restoration, the correction of the violation?
Okay, so let's continue this till we see the plan, how's that?
I'm in favor of just continuing this until we see a plan, and then if we have to put something official down, that's fine, but I like the idea of us all being on the same page with what we're gonna do. I think a continuance to whenever May, whatever you had suggested or whatever is not gonna make a bit of
See the
difference.
plan?
In a less amicable situation than we have here, the enforcement order would force that plan to be done.
I
So
doubt that
we're-
it'll be done.
it would
Right.
not, the plan wouldn't come before the enforcement order.
Right,
So for that reason,
yeah.
I think that doing the enforcement order, we have no doubt that we're going to get a plan.
Then why do we need an enforcement order?
Well, yeah, because, I mean,
I know I drive you crazy.
but theoretically, you know, there are people that are gonna say, well, I'm not gonna do what you say, and then
See
you
that-
have to
okay,
issue an
right.
enforcement order, so.
See,
these are-
that right there is why I almost don't want to do it, to make a point that I don't want us to be blowing one way or the other because there are people who have an issue or have some agenda of their own that has nothing to do with what we're doing. We're talking about some people that have come to us to let us know that there are some things at issue and from where I sit have brought it to our attention, not the other way around. So,
Agree.
I like there being a cooperative nature with this body, and I think if this body also can work with the public in a lot of different capacities. One, in terms of giving them a little bit of rope to work out a plan. I think that'll go a long way because as the wind blows, as the wind has blown, sometimes the air is hotter than others in different meetings, right? You know, I think it would go a long way to educating the public that this is a cooperative thing and can be.
I think we've done enforcement orders because we've had people come in here 5 times in front of us to say they're gonna do
Well, that's
something and not
exactly
do
right.
it, then we're forced to do an enforcement order.
Yeah.
This is not the case here.
Yeah.
Right.
So that's the only, I am absolutely against this. I'm in favor of continuing this till we see a plan, and then if they don't keep their word, which I'd bet my last dollar they will, then we don't have to do this at all.
Hey, you know what? If they don't come up with
And
a
we
plan,
still have an enforcement
guess what we
alternative.
get to do?
Right.
Enforcement order.
Yeah.
Then. But, so.
Jim?
I would agree that I don't think an enforcement order is really necessary.
Perfect. Can I make a
Okay.
motion that we continue this?
Save your dust.
I just want, yes, in a second. I have to get the last word.
I know you do. Not for long.
I agree with everything that you said and you said, but we, as you all know, we are under a microscope.
Good.
And if this is the process that normally should be followed, then I think we should follow it regardless of who the applicant, complainant, et cetera, is.
Right.
This is the process. We have been called on the carpet because we've varied and moved away from our process, and I don't want to put another arrow in the quiver of those who say we don't follow process.
But see, I think where you missed the point is regardless of what we do here, it's gonna put an arrow in the quiver. There's nothing, see, you're under some impression that you can appease the opposition. You can't. So no matter what you do, they'll come at you from a different angle. And until we stand up and say, enough, this is gonna continue on. And it's gonna be the next cranberry grower and the next project that Sarah tries to do, and then it's gonna whittle itself down to some poor guy trying to mow his grass in the backyard. And it's gotta stop. And if they wanna take and file actions, file them all day long. But we gotta stand up for what we believe in and what we know to be true. And this man has a reputation in this town, his family's been here forever, and to the best of my knowledge, neither one of those two individuals sitting at that table have ever told us a mistruth, have ever misled us, or told us something that didn't turn out to be exactly what they said it was gonna be. And that's good enough for me, and I don't think we need an enforcement order, and I don't really care what the opposition thinks, because you're never gonna make them happy anyway.
You know, too, we don't have to right the ship every time
Thank you.
somebody says something. I mean, this is a process that we can cultivate over time to, if we find that, you know, through a handful of similar cases, we're like, you know, I think maybe the process might work a little bit better this way. That's fine. We can vote to decide on procedural things like that down the road. But we don't have to be, we don't have to go back and forth just because somebody's, wants to say gotcha. They can say gotcha all the time. We're doing the best we can with the information we have from case to case. And all the bylaws, all the procedural stuff, it's an umbrella. It's an umbrella of information that we look at, we analyze, we decipher through, and I think if we had a checklist that thou shalt not deviate from that checklist, I don't think we would get half of anything done.
We wouldn't. Because along with being the checklist, you gotta be human.
That's it.
So, I would like to make a motion, Mr. Chairman, that we continue Tremont Street's DEPSE 126366 pending a revised, what do you want to call it? An updated
Restoration
plan?
plan?
A restoration plan.
Mhm.
And if you could give me a time frame on that, I'll be happy to put a date in there.
I had May 31st on the enforcement order, but if it's gonna be a draft, just a draft that you wanna look at?
Whatever it's gonna
Yeah.
take for us to give him an okey dokey.
I think I would like to keep May 31st if
Oh,
that's
okay.
on the table,
Yep.
just in case we
Yep.
have a delay in getting all the
So
information.
can we
Mhm.
continue
Survey.
this to May 31st?
I'll second that.
DEPSE 126366.
Our
So-
meeting would be June 7th, right?
So it could be the June 7th meeting, or it could be, if you were done earlier, it could be the May 17th or whatever it is. May 4, 7, 11, 7, 8, yeah, May 18th. You know what I mean, if you got it done before the 31st.
I can reach out to you and let you know
Yeah.
the progress that we're making, and
Well,
as I
let's-
said,
if you want to continue to June 7th. If it comes in
Okay.
earlier,
Okay,
there's no rushing to do this, is there?
well,
It-
it just depends on, when the landowner would like to undertake the actual work. We don't want to do it in the heat of the summer necessarily, but.
No, I understand that, but
Yeah.
I mean, there's no, if you're ready on the, if you're ready on the 18th and you're still continuing to the 7th, is that 3 weeks going to make a difference?
I don't think so.
Okay.
right.
So what do you want for a date in the motion?
So June 7th?
June 7th.
June 7th.
That's a
So-
Tuesday. Are you aware?
Oh, it's
June
Tuesday?
8th,
June
Oh, so
June 1st, then.
June
Right,
1st
my
is.
God almighty.
Oh, June
September
1st?
31st? June what now?
June 1st.
June 1st.
Is the first Wednesday.
That's the first one in June.
The motion will be June 1st, is that all right?
So that's only a day later.
June 1st,
Okay.
to continue DEPSE 126366.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
It's been moved and seconded to continue the DEPSE 126366 order of conditions, or the restoration plan. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, 4-0.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank
Okay,
you all.
thank you.
Thank you very much for coming.
All right, next up, request for COC 276 Federal Road.
All three of these have been continued because I needed to get Matt from Borrego to get us in onto the sites to take a look. So these will be on May 4th, so I'll
Okay.
let you know about the site visits for these. It'll
So
probably
these
be-
three.
It'll probably be the morning of May 4th.
Perfect.
So we'll do all three, because we can just go from one to the other.
We'll do the minutes at the end.
We'll do the minutes at the end.
Shoestring Road.
Okay. Shoestring Road, Ben's Pond, new hearing. Do we have a, and do we
You got
have
a
a?
number?
No DEP number? Okay. Notice is hereby given in accordance with the Massachusetts Wetlands Protection Act, MGL Chapter 131, Section 40, and the Carver Wetlands Protection Bylaw, that a public hearing will be held at 7:00 p.m. on Wednesday, April 20th, 2022, in Meeting Room 1 at the Carver Town Hall to hear the notice of intent filed by Northgate Resorts of Cape Cod for the long-term management plan at Ben's Pond to manage the dense growth of nuisance aquatic plants through herbicide, algacide, aeration, and/or bottom sealing. The project is located at 20 Shoestring Road, Carver, Massachusetts, map 124, lot 13-0. All interested parties are invited to attend.
I just got a couple,
Hi,
so 2 pages on each of these.
go ahead.
Good evening. My name's Anna Chase. I'm with ESS Group, and I'm here on behalf of Northgate Resorts Cape Cod.
Those go down there.
We're seeking an
problem.
order of conditions for the Ben's Pond Management Plan. So Ben's Pond, I believe a few of you attended the site visit yesterday with my coworker James.
Yep.
But for the rest of you, and just to get everyone on the same page, Ben's Pond is a small, about 7-acre water body that's primarily used for camp recreation, so swimming and fishing. It also provides wildlife habitat. A study or an assessment conducted last year in 2021 noted that there's some dense growths of nuisance native vegetation present in the pond, specifically in areas used for recreation near the beach area. This assessment also noted some low dissolved oxygen levels within the pond. So we are seeking approval for the management to proceed with a variety of different management actions at the pond to address these concerns. So the management plan includes a variety of different things. The first of which is the installation of an aeration system, which would promote mixing of water within the pond, which would increase dissolved oxygen levels and increase the habitat value within the pond. Also included in the management plan are the use of herbicides, specifically Percellacor and Clearcast. Both of these are systemic herbicides. Percellacor would be used to target the dense growths of native milfoil, which is the nuisance plant that's currently present in the pond. It's not one of the invasive species of milfoils. It's low water milfoil, but it's still present in a kind of a thick mat across much of the pond bottom, and it impedes recreational use of the pond. Percellacor is a systemic herbicide that would be applied and is incorporated into the plant tissues and leads to die-off of the whole plant, including the roots, so it's a longer-lasting control approach. If Clearcast, the only other herbicide listed in the NOI, were to be used, it would be used for emergent vegetation that's found kind of encroaching on the beach area. That's also native. The plan also includes the deployment of benthic mats, also called benthic barriers, specifically in the beach area. These benthic mats are negatively buoyant sheets, essentially, that are weighted down that prevent growth of all plants in that area. So these, again, would be targeted to the beach of the pond. Also included are 2 different methods of physical removal of nuisance native plants. Hand harvesting, which is pretty self-explanatory. It could be harvesting by hand with someone wearing waders, or snorkeling, or even scuba diving. And hydro raking, which is using machinery to remove plants. If hydro raking were to be used, it's not sort of a top priority at this point, it would be used in the beach area. Also included is fish stocking. The plan would be to stock the pond with both predator and prey species, specifically largemouth bass and I'm blanking on what it is. Sunfish, there we go. Largemouth bass and sunfish, which would be stocked from Massachusetts, licensed distributor, and those would increase recreational opportunities within the pond. The pond does see a good deal of catch and release fishing by campers, people at the camp and recreating. So adding to the fish community is something that they would like. Also included in the NOI is algacide treatments using copper-based algaecides. These would only be used in the event of an algae bloom. We usually include something like that in these long-term management plans, just to sort of have in our back pocket in case an algae bloom were to occur, either as a result of plant die-offs due to herbicide treatment or due to just climactic events in any given year could cause an algae bloom, and the treatment with algaecides would be able to quickly tamp down that bloom before it became problematic, both for health reasons if it was a cyanobacteria bloom, or for recreational reasons if it was just a green algae bloom.
You're gonna get some of that for your pond.
It's a big pond. Brooke, do you have documentation on the herbicides?
I think it's in the notice of intent, right?
Is it?
Yes, yep, the
Yeah.
product labels
read it?
should be included on the,
Here's
as an attachment.
couple
Yeah,
of
how many of
here's
those
the,
you got?
Oh,
I
okay.
only got a couple.
Oh, it's in here.
Prelacor. Do you have the actual document?
I don't.
Yeah, it was included in the.
Oh, okay.
the-
All right,
I only got
all right,
two
that's
copies of
fine.
but yeah. it's
Okay,
different.
as long as it's in the record.
Yep, it is, yep.
Okay.
Yes, and the herbicides would only be applied by a Massachusetts licensed herbicide applicator with a valid license to apply at the pond.
Okay.
To what extent do the herbicides kill off all the plant material in the pond?
So it varies by the herbicide used. For Ben's Pond, the most likely herbicide to be used would be Procelicor, because the biggest concern is that dense mat of the native milfoil species. And Procelicor is active and effective against several species of plants. It's very effective against milfoils. It's usually used against for non-native milfoil species, but all milfoils, which they're all in the same genus, are pretty susceptible to it. So they're able to apply it at a very low dose, and that is a high enough dose to lead to die-off of milfoil. There are other species, native species, that are susceptible to it, including, I believe some of them are water shield, which I believe is present at the pond, and a few other species. So there are some sort of side effects of treating with any herbicide. Procelicor is kind of one of the ones that is known to have less side effects because it can be applied at a very low concentration in the water column. But there are other plants that Procelicor will impact that are native, or in addition to the native milfoil, which is what they're really targeting here.
What would be left still growing? A lot?
So,
A lot?
it would depend. I personally have not been out to the pond yet. When they did the assessment last year, they noted that the bulk of the pond was occupied by this dense milfoil, which is, while it's a native species, it has reached nuisance levels because it's kind of almost a monoculture on the bottom of this pond. So right now, we have this monoculture of the native milfoil with interspersed other native vegetation in there, but it's a pretty dense mat that seems to be outcompeting all of these other different plants that can provide different types of microhabitats for various different wildlife species. So the goal would be after the treatment, there'd be dieback primarily of the milfoil with some other native plants that would also be impacted, and then that area would be open for more of the native plants to then recolonize. And there would be more open water area too, because right now it's a very dense coating on the bottom, and the pond is pretty shallow. And that very dense plant cover is not helping the water quality in the pond right now. That's where the aerators would come in, because the firm who conducted the assessment last year, Water and Wetland, they noted there was low dissolved oxygen in the pond. So it doesn't appear to be very good mixing in the water column. So the aerators would help create kind of like a circular flow, a turnover of the pond, which would benefit wildlife habitat, and decreasing this dense, fairly thick mat of plants on the bottom would also help increase the water quality in the pond.
The aeration will actually start to clean up the pond.
Yeah, that's also the goal, because in addition to increasing like the water quality from a purely like dissolved oxygen standpoint, which is good for fish especially, the mixing will expose some like bacteria and things and
They will
microbes
die off in the
that are down.
sunlight.
Yeah, it brings them up to the surface and they're exposed to greater amounts of UV, and it sanitize, doesn't sanitize,
balances-
but it cleans the
balances the
water.
water.
It leads to higher water quality levels.
Yeah.
How long does it take for the herbicide to work?
So Procelicor is, as I said, it's a systemic herbicide, so it needs to be taken up by the plant, and then it stops growth and slowly kills the entirety of the plant, like down into the root system. So it's a little bit slower than like a contact herbicide, which would only kill the portion of the plant that's in the water. So the roots would survive, and milfoils can grow from the roots, so that would not be very effective here. But it is still relatively quick. I'd say a couple of weeks, we usually start seeing pretty good action, and then in the court by a month, I believe that would be like the peak. But yeah, I'm not an herbicide specialist, so there might be differences, or there's small details about different ponds and sort of the retention rate and the turnover rate in ponds that can make the uptake rate of the plants differ. But it should be relatively quickly, but not so quick that it would cause a massive plant die-off, which could also cause problems because the decay of all of that vegetative material could lead to crashes in dissolved oxygen in the pond. So it's kind of a slower decrease in the amount of plants with this systemic herbicide.
Okay, one last question.
Oh, yeah.
I live on Sampson's Pond, which is also in South Carver. We have the milfoil as well. And
Oh, the native one?
the one that I saw along the shoreline
Yeah.
of Ben's Pond.
Good, that's native then.
He wants some of that stuff you're gonna use.
No.
He's gonna get to that in a minute.
Yeah, like a tanker truck full. My question is that I know that when we have low water in September, August, sometimes late July, and the milfoil is at the surface. You know, it's grown searching the sunlight, now
Yeah.
it's laying on the surface. And it does get chopped up on Sampson's Pond by outboard motors. And it floats.
Yes.
And it goes whichever way the wind blows and covers whichever beach area is in that direction of the wind. But that's clippings of it as opposed to the whole plant.
Yes.
If this is killing the plants right down through the roots, do the roots let go of the base, and are all these going to float to the surface at some point, or are they going to die in place?
So most of them will likely die in place, and it will be kind of like a gradual die-off, but there will definitely be some that kind of come to the surface that can then be, if they, wash up on the beach for the campground.
They will.
They can
Well,
and
they'll
because
wake
these
them
are
up.
not native. These are
Yeah.
the native species, which is handy, so they can gather those and compost them anywhere. They don't have special you don't have to worry about where to place the fragments because they can grow from fragments. But especially after the treatment, any fragments that do get washed up anywhere, they will be on their way out, so they'll be
Okay.
dying. Yeah.
Because it can be a lot.
Yeah, definitely. And thankfully, this is a native species, so if some fragmentation occurs and the fragments aren't quite dead and they get washed into a new place, the pond is very small and it is pretty much entirely full of milfoil currently. But if it were to get washed to a new place and it's not a pioneer infestation, it would just be a new pocket of the native species.
Okay.
But that is a definite concern for if this were an invasive, because fragmentation, especially by boats, can really
Right.
spread growth of milfoils.
Okay. All right, I said that was my last question. I lied.
Oh, that's fine.
They spoke at the site visit yesterday about the location of the aerator.
Yes.
They said that there was a ridge, an underwater ridge that
Yes.
they were talking about putting the aeration near or on that.
I believe so. I'm not sure, being that I was not at the site visit yesterday, I'm not exactly sure it was said, but the current plans for the aeration system, which were designed by a company that specializes in the aeration system, they're shown I'm not sure if everyone has this this image right here, but this is like a schematic
Yeah,
of the
they're in this
plan
book.
Okay.
for the aeration system, and you can see that there's 6 aeration heads that all come off of one cabinet, which has an air compressor in it, which is at a location that already has an electrical supply. And these were placed strategically to lead to turnover of all the water in the pond within 33 hours, which for a pond of Ben's Pond's size, the target is like 36 hours to get complete turnover of the water column. So this design with 6 aerators kind of spread throughout the pond would lead to turnover in 33 hours. So that's good. The current array, I don't know if you can quite see, but down here, the beach is down here in this like southwestern corner, and there are some lines of shallow ridges that were definitely man-made at some point in this area that are kind of close to the beach. And currently none of the aerators are placed in that region because with the knowledge that the surveyors last year had of the pond bottom topography, the placement of these, as shown here, is sufficient to cause turnover, and this will keep the aerators away from the beach area and away from potential interaction with people. Because they're like weighted hoses that sit on the pond bottom, and a little aerator, like a circular
Yeah, this shows a drawing. of
diffuser.
it, and
Yeah,
he's
I
actually
believe
looking
there's a
at the
drawing.
layout.
So they're just sitting on the substrate. So we want to keep those away from like the immediate beach area so that they're not destroyed or intentionally like played with by people.
It's all gonna run out from there. So that's
Okay.
like on page.
So there are going to be 6
Yes.
heads.
Yeah, the current design calls for 6 heads to cause the pond turnover in 33 hours.
There will be 6
I thought it was just one aerator though.
No. Let me
diffusers.
see the book. You got another book?
Because that was a question I asked yesterday on the site visit, and I was told 1.
Yeah,
I
we
asked how many
told 1.
aerators there were. Now, maybe
Yeah,
that was
I
just-
think there was a little bit of confusion yesterday.
JP said that, James didn't, so, maybe
Okay.
JP didn't know.
Okay,
Okay.
so they're going to be 6 heads.
Yeah, like
Heads.
there's a little like
Yeah, I saw
clip art
that.
version of it that shows like the 6
Okay.
aerators. They're quite small, but there will need to be 6 spread throughout the water body to cause turnover of the whole about
Yeah,
7
that makes
acres of the
sense.
pond.
Okay, all right. Yeah, I just wondered because I asked that question yesterday and was told 1, and then it would aerate the pond once a day.
I think what they might have been referring to.
And that was,
one cabinet.
A little different from what you said. So, I mean, I just want to make sure that it's,
Yeah.
that we know what we're talking about. So
Yes, yeah,
it
the
is
6 aerators and the 33 hours to turn over, that's like from the report from the designers of the aeration system, so.
Okay. All right. Now I'm done.
I think we still have to continue this. We need a DEP.
Yeah. we do.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's okay.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
I had a question. What's the human effects of the Algacide? What, in other words, are there any concerns that we have as far as on people, what the Algacide might do?
Yeah.
So for the Algacide, if that was used, and again, it's not super likely that it would be used, it's just kind of a tool to have, those are copper-based, and they're very quick acting. So that's why we like to include them in pond management plans, because algae blooms usually kind of peak and then drop off quickly, and the Algaecides, you need to apply them quickly, and then they act quickly, and then they aren't effective after that. For most algicides, as well as the herbicide applications, it's the herbicide applicator who would also apply the algicide. They'll post on the pond to like not be in the water or recreate on the water for like the day of the treatment, but for almost all of them, and all of them in this NOI, there aren't any like label restrictions on human contact with the water. There's some caveats about like irrigating with the water, certain types of plants for a certain short period of time afterwards, but there's no recreational like restrictions. Like you can swim, like on the herbicide labels, it'll say like there's no like restrictions on swimming or recreation or fishing or anything like that. So you could technically be doing it as they're applying, but as a rule, the herbicide applicators will post the pond to be like, don't be on the pond on the day of the application.
Yeah.
How often will the pond be monitored for algae?
I don't believe they have like a definitive like set monitoring schedule of like once a week or what have you. But my understanding is during, especially the summer months when potential blooms would occur, they're going to have staff at this pond like multiple times a day. So they would be able to notice quite rapidly if they were to get an algae bloom that was getting to the point where an algicide would be warranted. If it's a very small algae bloom that perhaps you can't see and you wouldn't notice unless you were taking regular water samples, that might not call for an algicide, but the algicide would really only be employed if there was a visible like green like sheen or like accumulation of cells on the water surface, which like a layperson could notice that very easily.
Yeah, we've had them on Sampson's Pond.
Yeah.
Does the campground allow dogs on leashes?
That is a question I do not have the answer for. I would have to check on that.
Okay,
I think they do.
Every
Okay.
campground allows pets.
okay.
They must.
Now, there are
yeah.
some campgrounds that have an area, they all have a pet walk
Right.
area. So the animals
I'm sure
aren't,
they will.
they're not roaming around at the beach
No.
is I think what your question is. Every campground we've gone to all has a pet area for you to walk your pet and clean up after it.
So then.
Right.
And then,
No,
and they're all required to be on a leash.
My question was more towards a potential algae bloom. You know, if there is an algae bloom, humans can see that and know to stay away. Dogs don't. Dogs go in the water, dogs get sick. And it may not only be at the beach area. If someone's walking around the perimeter of the pond with a dog on a leash, the dog can go in the water and start drinking it. And
Right.
I just wonder if there's any kind of a notification system going to be in place to the guests at the resort
I
that,
don't believe that typically the animals aren't allowed anywhere near the pool or a pond in the campgrounds we've gone to. In other words, you can't set
Well-
your beach chair up on the sandy
But
beach
the-
of the pond and have your dog there. They
but
won't
the
let dog
property,
near the
the
pond.
property around the pond is owned by the applicant, I believe. And they're going to, they allow fishing around the perimeter. So there are gonna be people there, and people could go with their dogs on a leash and
We
fish.
could put that in
I
an
just,
order
I
of
just was
conditions.
curious about, making sure that
You could request that there be a caution posted or something like that.
yeah, that people understand, because there may be people who are here who've never been to a lake before and don't know what an algae bloom is and don't know to keep their dogs away. So, just something to think about. Anybody else?
Sure.
No, other than obviously we have to continue this anyway, but like with a lot of these things, the treatment plan, other than posting, I hate the idea of us approving anything without there being some type of, monitoring plan for
Put
this.
that in the order.
Yeah.
Well, they do have to test the water anyway, because,
Right.
for Board of Health,
We can put a frequency test. They're gonna
Right.
need to test the water for the Board of Health on a regular basis. 'Cause
Which
you
they
gotta
have to
get
do
some-
anyway. 'cause
And
they're-
actually,
for people
the
swimming.
side effects of a couple of the herbicides that you did mention can, depending on the sensitivity of people coming in and deciding whether or not to read posts anyway, can be fairly aggressive in terms of nausea and vomiting and worse. So it's those, they're not something that just will make your skin just get rashy. It can be a little bit more than that, and certainly with pets. But that aside, I don't know if you could give us a little bit more information on if there's going to be some type of monitoring post the treatment to confirm that the water is safe for people to go in and again, other than, it should be okay. I'd like to see something that says that it is in fact okay if we're giving approval for this process.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
We could do in the order of conditions, we could require that the
They submit.
pond not be used for, pick a time, 48, 72 hours after a treatment, and then pending a test.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I
So
don't
we
care
just-
if it's,
Even if it was a test on a logbook, you know what I mean? You have to come down and show us the results.
Right.
But as long as, you keep a logbook, like you would with a pool, there's whoever takes care of a pool at any commercial place or a campground, they log it. They log the pH levels and so forth and so on, so that's how they track it, how much chlorine they've used and so forth. We could do the same thing here, where, it could be in the order that, the pond not be used by folks for, pick a time, like I said, 48, 72 hours after the treatment, and then before you open it to the public, you must take a sample and just log that in a book somewhere so that we would have access to it if we needed to do an inspection or, or we could find, we could strengthen it in that respect. Somewhat.
We could. I'm not sure if that falls under our jurisdiction. I'm wondering if there may be in the order of conditions that we request that the Board of Health do that
Yeah.
and put the timeline on it.
that's fine, but it's sort of a.
We're the ones that are approving the
That's right.
herbicide though,
Yeah.
Right.
and the algicide,
Right.
so we
Okay,
can,
all
we
right,
can,
granted.
we can
Yeah.
stipulate,
Yeah.
we can't say you can drink it, 'cause that's the Board of Health, but
Okay,
we can stipulate the conditions that are used in order to apply this material. That
okay.
falls within our purview.
All right, so then we would need the information from, unless it's already in that book, on
It
this,
is.
on the safety,
I'll
how
take a
long it.
look at
Yeah,
that.
the MSDS sheets are in there
Yeah,
too.
they are, yeah.
All right, okay. That's fine.
Still
So-
with us? You know what we're getting at?
Okay,
I make a
Great.
motion, we continue. 20 Shoestring Road, Ben's Pond, DEPSC 126, we don't know, until we get a DEP number,
Yep.
which could be,
Probably be, I would think it would be fairly soon, probably within a week or so.
fairly soon,
So
kind of tough.
probably, we'll
yeah.
probably have by the next meeting.
Okay, which would be
May what?
May 4th.
To May
We should-
4th.
Yeah, we should have it.
All right, is that a motion?
To May 4th, and I'll put the caveat in, provided we have a DEP number. If we don't, we can continue it to the following meeting beyond that without having to put it
Yeah.
on and continue it again.
Yeah, but meanwhile,
So-
I mean, I can do the order and all the conditions and stuff that we
Okay.
talked about.
All right, do I hear a second?
Second.
All right, it's been moved and seconded to continue the hearing on 20 Shoestring Road, Ben's Pond, to Wednesday, May 4th. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Okay.
Hearing none. Approved unanimously.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
I think it was provided we have a DEP number, but that's
Right,
okay.
well,
Yeah.
that's okay.
Forgot.
All right,
Okay,
next up,
minutes.
the minutes.
And then get the hell out of here.
I had a minor correction on both, one minor correction on each of the two that are to be read. I've given them to Ashley already.
What?
On the May 23rd, on page 2, the very first line, it says Sarah Stearns Fields and Thomas. It should be Beals and Thomas.
That's her autocorrect is what
It
that
is.
is.
And on the April 6th, on page 1, under the 14 Cranberry Circle, the second line down, it says to take a look at the erosion and the wall comes off the road. It should be water.
Water, right.
Water comes off the road. So, those are my two corrections.
Where was that one? I'm sorry.
On April
Under
6th,
14 Cranberry
the
Circle.
second, the request for COC, page 1, right by
Yeah,
your
yeah, yeah.
finger. Right there. The
The
wall
wall
comes
fell
off.
off the road.
It should be water.
I love it.
So I'll entertain a motion to
Wait a
approve.
minute. Oh, you're with the wall.
Entertain a motion to approve the minutes of March 23rd.
So
That's
moved.
correct.
Is there a second?
As corrected, I'm sorry.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right, it's been moved and seconded to approve the minutes as corrected of March 23rd. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none. They're approved.
Make a motion to approve April 6th as corrected.
Second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the minutes of April 6th as corrected. All those in favor say aye.
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 Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none. It's approved unanimously.
Motion to adjourn.
Is there anything else, Brooke, first?
Not really, I mean, I gave you the stuff from 5 John's Pond. I didn't really put it on the agenda because I just wanted to.
But it's not
you know,
here, so
it's
we
kinda-
can't talk
It's with
about it.
DEP now anyway.
Right.
So there's not a lot we can do with any of it.
Can't talk
but-
about it, it's not on the agenda.
Yeah, I just thought you'd be interested. You wanted to see the letter that she had sent to DEP anyway.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we have a motion to adjourn, second?
Second.
Moved and seconded to adjourn. All those in favor say aye.
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 That's a good idea about the enforcement.
Any opposed? Hearing none. We're out.
We're
Thank
out.
you.